And now, back to the Debbie Nigro Show.
I'm the type of girl that's always loyal to the end. People come and go, but I'll always...
Okay, we're looking for leaders. That's what we're looking for these days because we need smart people and energetic people to follow and lead. And we're in a very crazy time in the world. And some people are better at it than others. But you can be taught. Yes, you can. Hi, everybody. I'm Debbie Nigro. You know, inspired by all the commencements going on this week and graduating classes and everybody's aspirations. I know that life has a lot of twists and turns, right? And sometimes you need somebody to steer you in the right direction. So I'm going to welcome a terrific guest today, Rebecc Shambaugh, who knows a thing or two about helping people rise, women in particular, helps them rise to the top. I mean, why would you want to go anywhere else, right? She has a company called Shambaugh Leadership, and she's the founder of Women in Leadership and Learning. And I love that she asked the question, have you ever felt stuck in your career? I mean, like, who hasn't, right? And thought women often think they've hit a glass ceiling. She says what stops people is not that ceiling, it's the sticky floors. I love that. Becky, welcome.
Debbie, hello. Nice to be here with you today.
Boy, you're a really smart girl. Boy, oh boy. Were you a leader as a kid, Becky?
You know, I think your environment early on does shape who you are today, right? And, well, I didn't see myself as a leader. I couldn't quite articulate it, but I knew I was purposeful in what I did, and I did have that vision in my head about what it is today. It's just really helping people reach their full potential, and I think that's just evolved in a different context as I continue my journey.
Yeah. Look, I love to ask this question with people who have big brains like yours. Like, what goes on in your head every day? How does your head work inside? What are you thinking about all the time?
What I'm thinking about, number one, is keeping out the chatter. You know, I think that I learned a long time ago when I kind of claimed the sticky floor syndrome that a lot of times that chatter in our heads, those assumptions and narrative, can really limit our possibilities during the day, feeling purposeful, feeling joyful, really taking in nature or good things that are happening and showing up with your best self. So the first thing I do before I put my feet on the floor is to say, what's really purposeful and what am I going to do today that's going to make me happy and joyful? But isn't it already a joyful day, right? So starting it off that way, positively. But my day gets quite busy. So I think it's like all of us is how do you, even more since this new era, there's so many things coming at you. Our business is booming. I've been asked to speak so many places, and where do you really sort of set the work-life balance piece of that too? So I think I'm constantly challenged with kind of living that sort of element of my life, and then I've come to learn that, you know what, everything is just starting to blend. And so the work and the personal really have to blend and be aligned with each of those elements of one's sort of journey, if I keep referring to in that story. So, but I spent a lot of my time, again, starting with the positive affirmations and then being purposeful and present even more about who I'm connecting with, how can I meet them where they're at, and what can I learn from that day, and how can I best be of value. I think one of the key things today for women, for anyone, is to be relevant and knowing your value, right? And not to get confused about that. So I think that's, I was doing a CEO roundtable yesterday, and we talked about the imposter syndrome and how we as women, given our research, tells us that sometimes we just defeat our own self. We don't have that confidence in ourselves. We don't know our value. So it's important as we sort of unwind into this new normal, I think it's past the post-pandemic, that we know our value and declare our ambitions and be purposeful of how we're going to channel that.
I have imposter syndrome, so I get what you're saying, and people listening be like, are you kidding me, Debbie? And because usually it's hidden behind somebody who acts totally confident all the time. Is that fair?
Debbie, I would never guess that. And researching you before we got on here today, I would never guess that you had the imposter syndrome, but we become skilled at covering that up. We've just done it for so long. We're very, very good at it.
Really good.
And so I think the key thing is to, first, what I've learned is to hang out with people that believe in yourself, that believe in you, and have that broader understanding and vision of you sometimes that you may not have of yourself, but continuing to affirm your unique strengths and be intentional around that. And then sometimes you need the coaching and support, the mentoring to really help you to get out of that sort of, it's almost like it's a habit, right? And sometimes life is about breaking old habits. And I think sometimes we need the tools and coaching to help us to disrupt that.
You know, it's funny, as we're talking today, and Taylor Swift was the commencement speaker this week at NYU at Yankee Stadium, and she didn't have a 4-year college degree, Becky, right? So I was talking about rising women, and they come in all shapes and forms, and I know you're on a mission to develop very high-performing and inclusive leaders who transform workplace culture so everybody else can thrive too. But how hard is it now for women, especially, I have to throw in the pandemic because, you know, life did change, and mothers in particular got nailed, having to leave their jobs to go home because that was the priority versus travel the world and keep up whatever they were doing, trying to keep that balance. Is it harder now, you think?
Oh, that's a great question. That is such a great question. I'll tell you this, that it's such a paradox right now. Debbie, I think that the COVID pandemic, everybody was working at home, but it was extremely a struggle and a stretch and really disrupted family, disrupted well-being of people's lives. And I think I think a lot of this happened before COVID, right? Women particularly were trying to do it all and trying to get to the office or just trying to get on the screen, right? Been tackling elderly care, children, and now the daycare syndrome where some folks can't afford it or it's just not offered because of, you know, folks not fully, you know, sort of up and running with some of the daycare systems. So that's another story around policy. But here's my hope, is that, you know, with the great resignation and the challenges that we've had that have brought this to a visible level for organizations, I think there is a new trend arising around the great people-centric sort of focus, if you will, and organizations that are, and society and institutions are realizing that they just can't continue to watch this go by. Economically, from a cultural perspective, from a customer perspective, and just from a well-being perspective. So we are working with I'm meeting with a lot of CEOs who are intentionally putting some bold actions in place to be able to transcend women back into the workforce, or maybe be able to work at home and actually be visible and have a potential opportunity within the organization that they aspire to. So, but I will say this, and I say this in all my talks, that today we're resetting and rebooting ourselves, our personal lives, resetting priorities, but also I think that organizations and leadership models as a whole are rebooting and transitioning from the old to the new. And here's where I think that women can play a huge role because of all of the leadership attributes. I go through like 4 or 5 of these that are transcending, no matter what gender, into the best leaders, you know, that will take their organizations and forward, and that's around empathetic leader. Empathy in terms of listening and learning and meeting other people where they're at and bringing them in, to that collaboration, right, that intentional collaboration, to be more innovative and creative, inclusive as a leader. All of those strike me, and as the studies will say, are mapped back to women's unique strengths. Oh, and another big one in the center is leading through crisis. And so I think these are opportunities for women to, whether they wake up or they bolster themselves, to really flex these muscles and take the lead and bring other people along with these new leadership traits, because that's actually where we're going. And I think that's where the opportunity, the silver lining, is for women.
Yeah. In terms of balance of talents, right? I know your team has worked with over 500,000 leaders across the world, pioneering leadership development programs that focus on the advancements of women leaders in the workforce. Is there a loud enough acknowledgement that the balance of talents between how women think and men think lead to the better bottom line? Have they figured that out yet?
Well, you hear different sort of, you know, statistics and metrics about that around diversity, and but diversity is really more of a metric as it is to a qualitative sort of calculus of what happens in the room when you have that balance of leadership. I think, you know, I'll just give you a quick story. You know, we're working with a large financial global company that's based out of New York, and they said, you know, while gender balance is important, and we use this integrated leadership concept, what I need around balance in the room is diversity of thought and ideas, cognitive diversity, gender, ethnicity, background, because I think it minimizes the risk of an organization. I know when I'm over in Asia Pac, or I'm in San Francisco, or I'm home at night, that we will make good, sound decisions and tackle the problems in the right way because we have that diverse spectrum of perspective and leadership around the table. And, it's not that men are better or smarter or women are smarter or better than each other, but it's that blend of people, of diversity of thought and experiences that doesn't leave any stone unturned. And they're making sure they're mapping that back to the customer, upstream, downstream, but a different lens that will say all of a sudden, I just come from a different seat than you all, and I see this slightly differently. And we need that diversity of thought. So hence it gets back to the gender balance. And I go back to the leadership model. Personal story, when I was starting off early in corporate America, General Motors and Amex, I would always be invited, Debbie, to these meetings. That it was out of my swim lane. I was human resources, kind of learning, type of professional and running those types of teams. And I always got brought into operational finance meetings, strategy meetings. And I turned over to my colleague after we were leaving the meeting. I said, Bill, I don't know why I keep getting invited to these meetings. I don't get it. I'm happy to be here. He said, you know why? Because you bring a unique perspective and lens that we don't. And number one is you're collaborative. You're making sure that all voices are heard. You connect the dots. And you're strategic. You have a big picture. You keep us on track. And so I think that's just an example of what I hear from so many women who are sitting on boards or at the C-suite at that next level down. They're getting the same type of feedback that it helps just balance things out.
I'm looking at the companies that you work with. You're crazy, involved here. IBM, SAP, Facebook, Dow, Microsoft, Bank of America, Unisys, Sodexo, Equifax. Are you kidding me? All day long. How many people do you have working with your company?
Well, I've been doing this for a long time, Debbie. This is my life's work. My company started 23 years ago, right? And I kind of started it myself. But we have people all over the world. We have a main core of folks back here at our headquarters in the Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia area. But everyone that really goes in and listens to the organization as consultants to really come up with, important data, information to really help organizations to create a roadmap and to bring the invisible up to the visible level to people actually go out and coach, advise, and bring people through the leadership journey to really bolster their leadership development to executive coaching. And then one of my passions is probably sort of inferred by reading the background is around women in leadership. And so I have a whole division of my company that focuses on the research, targeted programs and solutions and coaching for women in all shapes and sizes. But I think our major swim lane has really been in the women's leadership area. And I created the Women's Leadership and Learning Institute probably close to 19 years ago when it was hush-hush and nobody would talk about it. But you know what I did? One of the first things I did when I created a board, I got two of my male colleagues, friends, on this board to represent this vision I had. And then from there, we brought on another 4 or 5 board members who are a mix of men and women. But we need men to be a part of this and to be a part of this effort and initiative. And they were instrumental.
Okay, I have to stop you there. We're kind of running out of time, but I got it, and you got it. And it's just been a pleasure having you, Rebecc Shambaugh. Thanks for enlightening me. I feel all leadered up and ready to roll today. And for anybody who wants to know more about Becky, it's ShambaugHleadership.com. Congratulations on your Women Who Rise podcast, and I'll talk to you more about that another time, okay?
Look forward to it, Debbie. Thank you.
Great to have you.
Bye now.